Welcome to Beers with Contractors. We're cracking a cold one and taking a deep dive into the foundations of your business, pun intended, to unearth the strategies, techniques, and insider knowledge that can take your contracting business to the next level. So, grab your favorite beer, pull up a seat, and let's have a chat about the nuts and bolts of the construction industry.
Dillon,
Will,
another episode.
we're back. The brews have already been cracked.
Yep. Pre-game's done.
Yep, we got to get ready for the podcast. And then we roll into the podcast.
We screwed up last time because we didn't do our pay it forward thing. I'm shamelessly wearing the koozie of my foundation repair company, Vesta, my alma mater. So, who you repping?
Site 1, Landscape Supply. So, great supplier out there. I know a couple businesses that use them and great things.
Well, how's life?
Life is good. Yesterday, hung out with some friends and was reminded that I'm not in my 20s anymore because we played a pickup game of basketball and now everything hurts.
Well, wait till you get closer to 40, buddy.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Life is good. I mean, can't complain. It's going to be 55 degrees in December. I'm digging this global warming thing.
It's working out in your favor?
Seasonal depression is a real thing for me. Like, I hate winter. It's the worst.
Have you ever tried a happy light? Have you heard of those? They're these lights that are supposed to basically emulate the UV rays in the sun. And so it's supposed to make you happier. You should go look into them.
I was really glad to hear you say that and not some joke or something like that. It is beer with Contractors.
It is beer with Contractors. We have to stay true to our name.
Yeah. So what you got today? What's on your mind?
Well, the HR background, one of the core things that HR managers and owners have to do is bring in new talent. And I know that you've brought in a lot of talent in your many years in contracting. And so I imagine you have some interesting experiences, some good, bad, and ugly around interviewing. And so I thought it would be beneficial just to kind of hear, what's your take on the selection process? And what does it look like for contractors that are, they're trying to bring in new talent, but they keep running into a wall and something's just not changing for them?
Well, most of those screw-ups are on my end, obviously. I think when you start your own business, there's not like a class. Hell, even if you go to college, I don't even think there's a class on how to appropriately interview for the specific role that you've got. So I was really bad at it for years because I probably fit the stereotype of most contractors. It was like, I just need people. Dude showed up on time. Like, he doesn't have beer cans falling out of his truck or anything. And like, yes, you can start tomorrow, right? And I think that's where most people, we've heard the saying like, hire slow, fire fast, things like that. And I heard that for years, but just never actually took it to heart. But, I think we can equate, and this, we can equate to like half turnover is not really because of the job. It's poor hiring and selecting of people. So I think number one is just being intentional about having a process about interviewing and really trying to identify like, what are we trying to really learn from this individual other than the basics? Like, do they show up on time? Are they well dressed? Are they presentable in front of a customer or a coworker? I mean, those types of things are just kind of par for the course, but you're never going to get to know somebody in one setting. So it's best to have multiple settings and multiple eyes and ears on it and intentionally have a process. And you and I have done this for years where we've constantly reworked our interview guides, trying to ask questions intentionally around, well, one of my favorite books is The Ideal Team Player by Pat Lencioni. Is that how it's pronounced?
Patrick Lencioni.
Well, anyway, old Pat wrote a great book called Ideal Team Player. It essentially says, like, you want to identify the ideal team player falls under three categories. They're humble, they're hungry, meaning they have work ethic, and then they're people smart, meaning they're not a weirdo. They've got emotional intelligence, right? And, just asking questions around that. And I think we laugh about this. What's that question? Anytime somebody asks it, like, I want to jump off a roof. It's about work ethic.
Just describe your work.
It's just kind of like peeling back the layers. And I hate to say it, kind of feel like an attorney when you do this. Like, you just want to ask questions that are going to be open-ended and can lead to a lot of dialogue. Like, rather than saying, describe to me your work ethic, insert lie here. It's like, describe to me something that you worked the hardest you ever have in your life on something personally. and then let them answer and then follow up with, okay, what's changed in your work life since? Tell me more. And it's kind of like that scene from Dude, Where's My Car? Where it's like, and then, and you just keep asking. And another thing, I think like when we talk about interviewing, a lot of people just think a job application is the interview process, and it's not, right? One of those where if you really look at the interview process, you want to come prepared with a list of questions. That also helps your show up, Ray, when people know what to expect out of, hey, what is this? I don't even think I call it interview process. It's a discovery process now, because they're interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing them, right? And I think we all, what is it? The hierarchy of need. Like every employee needs like food, water, shelter, right? And they do that through their job. So that's kind of par for the course. We know that, but now we got to get up to the other levels. And, you and I have been perfecting interview guides. And that's what I love about it is we bring new generations in, and you kind of have to ask these questions a little different. I mean, what's your take on it, Mr. HR?
Well, when the unemployment rate is as low as it is currently, and it's relatively low, I think we, as employers, start to think like it's going to be easy to find talent. Like there are people out there, and I'm the one that gets to control, right? I will be the one that has all the power and the relationship across the table. But ultimately, as employers, you have to recognize that whether unemployment is low, high, whatever it is, people have options, right? And so the interview process is just as much a sales process of your organization. And I think a lot of contractors will forget that. They're just like, oh, they need a job. Like they need to sell themselves. And it's all about what they do for me. And it's like, no, take a step back. Look at your organization. Why would someone want to work for you? Like, what about you is different? What can you do for them and for their family, for their goals, their personal goals? And what interest do you show in them? And then, you give them a tour of the place, or, you make it personal to them. But yeah, I get a kick out of interviews gone bad because, I think there is a level of desperation and you're just like, I really love this guy, but he or she did this, that they cussed 17 times in the interview, but we can look past it because, I think they've got a good heart, It's like, well, I don't know. Do you want the guy that cussed 17 times in an interview talk to your customer? I don't know. You need to think that through. And we find ways to forgive the blemishes of people easily. We have little biases inside of ourselves. So we have to become conscious of that when we interview. And that's where I think, having a really systematic, like, here are the interview questions. They're behavior-based. So we're going to learn about their previous behaviors because those previous behaviors are going to be the greatest indicator of their future behaviors. And then they can't just tell you what you want to hear, right? They're going to tell you based off of what they're capable of because they've done it before. So it's about coming prepared. Like if you don't come prepared, they won't want you.
Yeah, but you reminded me of something. I remember years ago, we wouldn't offer, and this feels like ancient history. We wouldn't give a salesperson the job if they didn't ask for the job, which was like, looking back, I'm like, man, I probably passed on a lot of good salespeople because just didn't check that one box. But now knowing what we know, of course, but the other fact is I look at hiring a lot like sales, and it's like, hey, if I have 100 customers, how many end up resulting in jobs? Well, if I've got 100 candidates, and this kind of alludes to something you were talking about with the unemployment, like I was talking to somebody the other day, they live in an area with 3.5 million people and they need 2 people. And I'm like, dude, I like your odds, right? Now, if you're living in nowhere like farmland, Montana, your talent pool is going to be less. So those are different issues. But I think changing the mindset around hiring, number one, starts with like, what is your general disposition around hiring? Do you genuinely think nobody wants to work? Do you generally think that like every millennial and Gen Z wants a trophy and they're on their phone all the time? Well, dude, you're going to have a tough time hiring. But back to the sales thing is like, the cool thing about hiring is if you know how to advertise your position right, you have a system and a process, it's the one area where you actually get to say no to more people than you say yes to. And I think that's another thing that owners are just afraid to say no to people, but you're really good at this. Like, you let people down with grace all the time. And then we've even had people like show up being like, hey, my buddy didn't get the job working for you, but I just heard so many great things about your company and I was wondering, can I put in my application? And it's like, we forget we should treat candidates like outspoken customers because they're going to go into the community and talk about their experience, right? And if you were late to the interview 15 minutes and wasn't prepared and you don't even have a pen or an interview guide, then that's a whole other mess. So we got to change the mindset around that as contractors, because ultimately it's not getting any easier. You know, you've heard me talk about this, but speaking of which, you've changed this around a few times. How do you say no to people, and especially if they're a referral from another employee? Because I think that's where a lot of people see increased turnover, is because they just assume, well, they were referred by Johnny, so we got to hire him, and, you know, we need people, so Johnny's great, and so it's de facto, we're just going to hire him. But you know just as well as I know that's not sustainable. But how do you let people down easy?
Yeah, this is a really tough thing, because if they're not already an employee, saying no to a candidate, you can have some level of transparency, but maybe you don't want to tell the entire story just because you want to protect some level of, you know, your confidentiality or even fear of like lawsuits or something. But I would actually treat that the same as I would treat disciplinary measures in an office, that you come at it with the employee that I have your best interest in mind. Candidate, I have your best interest in mind. You're not the right fit for our organization. We're looking for X, Y, or Z, and you look like you have something else, and we want you to be fulfilled, right? So we've actually had interviews with candidates that were like, yeah, I don't think you'd be the right fit for this position. I'll keep you in mind for that position when it comes available. Or actually, I know other contractors. Let me pass you on, right? And that relationship's built. Even if they don't get that job with someone else, you know they're leaving with good feelings, good sentiments towards your organization. And you do it in a really graceful way. Like, hey, I know you've got talent, but your talent's not perfect for here, and we're looking for a really good fit right here. So I think it's being as transparent as possible, but people respond really well when you come at it from a perspective of this is for your best interest and this is for your fulfillment, right? Me disciplining someone, you know, a written warning isn't because I'm just mad at you and you're just the worst employee or something. It's no, like, I know you could do better and I know the organization could do better. I want you to be a fulfilled employee. So that's why we're having this conversation. So it's the same concept.
We're overcomplicating an easy topic, aren't we? It's like the golden rule, like treat people like the way you want to be treated, right? Well, cool. Well, I know it probably sounds like we're speaking, you know, quantum mechanics to somebody that doesn't know it, but our guest today, sometimes it's just, well, you're going to find out. Like I like to think I'm pretty successful, but our guest today, like, blows me out of the water. And then when he starts talking about all this stuff, I'm just, half of it I shut down. But anyway, he's a brilliant guy. So our guest today is the owner and CEO of Tatco Construction. So Tatco specializes, they're a commercial contractor that specializes in what's called QSR. So that's quick service restaurants. And they've got projects spanning over 6 states. Okay, look at that. He's losing count. 6 states, completing numerous projects a quarter. But Brett, this guru that I'm going to introduce you to, has grown Tatco from 0 revenue in 2020 to over $30 million in 2023.
Wow.
Yeah, so you hear how braggadocious I am sometimes, and then I hear these numbers, $30 million a year business. But super excited to introduce, you know, not only an entrepreneur, but a contractor, but a very good friend of mine, Mr. Brett Tatum. Brett, thanks for coming, buddy.
Welcome to Beers with Contractors.
That has got to be the kindest introduction I have ever heard about myself.
I can be paid off pretty well.
I'm glad to know the amount was enough.
That's what we could talk about tons of stuff, but give us the history, man. How did you get into this? And because you've got a pretty, like, you're like Forrest Gump, man. You've led a full life and you're only, what, 34?
34 at last count, but I'm as old as I've ever been. Yeah, so I mean, most of the contracting construction world would probably look at me as a fish out of water, and I feel like that half the time. Born and raised here in Oklahoma. I was an Edmond brat. Went to Oklahoma State for college. Got an accounting degree like most construction professionals. Worked for 6 years in the energy space. Worked for a company out of Wichita, Kansas. Bounced around a few different spots with them. And then, you know, to be perfectly honest, got tired of gray walls and cubicles and kind of the big corporate lifestyle. So my wife and I wanted to find an opportunity to move back to Oklahoma, and we did, just really with no real plan for what we were going to do when we got back down here to Oklahoma, but ran into a gentleman that I knew, family friend, awesome guy, was starting his own construction company. This would have been about 4 years ago. Well, sorry, I guess it was about 7 years ago. And he had a whole career in construction, was going out on his own. He needed a bookkeeper. And I was like, well, you don't have an office. You definitely don't have cubicles. And I have an accounting degree and know how to work QuickBooks.
And you were like the actress on, what was it, Bridesmaids? Like, help me, I'm poor.
Yeah, we were drifting towards poor at that point. Yeah, so, I don't know why I said yes. I think I ran into him in the parking lot of a coffee shop where I was meeting someone in the oil and gas industry to talk about a job opportunity with him. And anyways, it just sounded exciting. It was something different. I don't know why I said yes, but yeah, so, got QuickBooks fired up for him, and he was, kicking off what turned out to be a very successful business. I got bored, asked if, he maybe kind of show me the ropes on the construction side and project management, and he did. And, 4 years there, learned just enough to be dangerous about construction, but loved the industry, loved the concept of starting something and finishing something. I mean, so much of our world is processes that never end. You're a cog in a wheel that's always spinning. And that's how I felt in the world that I was in before construction. So there was just something kind of gratifying to a man's soul to just see a completed work. And anyway, so that's what drew me to the industry after I was already in it. And then it was just that itch that I had to go scratch of trying it on my own. I mean, there was no rhyme or reason. I think Dave Ramsey says, get the boat as close to the dock as you can before you jump off. And, it was July of 2020, which we'll all look back and go, that was the middle of COVID.
That's what Dylan said when I told him July 2020. He was like, wow, what a great time to start a business.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I missed out on was all the PPP money. But, you guys may remember this from that time. Like, construction didn't slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was...
Picked up.
Yes. I mean, if anything, it picked up. And, I don't know that commercial construction necessarily felt the pent up demand that was coming from people sitting at home. But needless to say, it didn't slow down. So there was opportunities out there. There's always opportunities for the little guy who can work cheap. And, I guess if someone's going to ask, what's your advice for getting started? It's like, there's always a niche. Like, we didn't invent anything new. The world's not short on commercial general contractors. I mean, in Oklahoma, to be a general contractor, you just have to raise your hand. I mean, there's not a license. There's not a fee to even pay. But I was a one-man shop, and it allowed us the opportunity to go in and, I was just trying to figured if I can make 10% margins and I can go find $1 million worth of work and revenue, I can make $100,000. That's going to be enough to raise a family of 4 at the time. And I mean, that was the goal. I mean, there was no lofty, large revenue, employees, none of that. It was just figure out how to pay the mortgage, put food on the table. But I think there's something about that motivation too that can be, kind of a great launching pad to get started.
Well, and I think when, first off, thank you for sharing that, because I didn't know that all about your history too. I knew you went to school for accounting, which, we get to meet and speak with people all the time that get into construction that didn't come from construction. Mm-hmm. And I love hearing these stories. But one thing I think you've done really well, Brett, is, and maybe I'm wrong here, so correct me if I'm wrong, you've done really well at staying in your lane. And what I mean by that is, as work gets slow, most general contractors are like, all right, today I'm a roofer. And then I'm doing parking lots, and they start to diversify and get into things that they're really not good at. They're just trying to make ends meet. But you have specifically, I should say, intentionally stayed within and correct me if I'm wrong, this 2 to 3 billion range. And you don't take on the small jobs, but you don't go after the monster commercial jobs. And you were the one that enlightened me on this concept of QSR, quick service restaurants. And so what that means, well, elaborate on that and tell me about that journey of saying, this is the industry or the product I'm going to focus in. And if there were any areas where, you were maybe enchanted away from getting away from that and got back in, but take our listeners through all that.
You said earlier, or referenced Forrest Gump, and that it kind of makes me pause and think about you see intentionality in a specific niche. I mean, we have Forrest Gumped our way to this point, and I think it only looks linear in hindsight, and it all looks put together and is a neat and tidy package. But if anyone who works for the company listens to this, they're gonna laugh to hear anyone say that we're very discerning and we have like this approach to the projects we take.
Okay. You see, we're finding the chinks.
We started off doing interior residential or interior commercial remodels and build outs. So, your nail salons in a strip center, your barber shops, your local salad joint. I mean, it is kind of the lowest end as far as project size of commercial construction, but it's commercial construction. I think the only thing that I consciously said we weren't going to do was residential. I just didn't feel like I had the patience or maybe the emotional intelligence to deal with that. I like, you give me a set of plans, you tell me what color carpet you want, I'll put that carpet in. Like we're not going to go sit around talking about the difference between Ivory Bluff and, Snowflake. You want Contractor white? That, being in the commercial space, though, definitely opened up some of those doors that got us into QSR. And I mean, the QSR space started for us with our first Starbucks. We got to build the Starbucks at May and Memorial here in Oklahoma City. And it was a developer that we'd worked for in the past doing some of those nail salons and office build outs. And I don't think I intentionally have done a ton of things where I had a lot of foresight and, okay, if I pursue this is really going to lead to a lot of opportunities. However, that first Starbucks was one that, the spidey sense kicked in a little bit and said, hey, this is worth really pursuing. Probably just because I saw it as a name brand, right? If I tell you I built an office space for Unison, you're going to go, oh, okay. It's not a known thing, and it's just office space. But if I tell you I built a Starbucks, you immediately know what we built. You can picture what that project is. So the developer on that went to him and said, hey, I know we've done some other work for you. I'd love to take an opportunity to bid this Starbucks. I think we can do a great job. And he said, no. I said, no, you stay in your interiors, doing a great job. I've got someone else for that. And so I waited a week, went and asked him again, and said no. And 2 weeks later, said no again. Finally, I was like, just let me give you a bid. I mean, you don't have to use it. Worst case, it'll give you something to go beat up the other guy with. So finally sent me the set of plans.
Nice. Good job on the persistent.
That spanned over the course of a couple months trying to even get that opportunity. And then I know I was cheap because he called me after I sent that bid in.
Did he tell you how bad it was?
No, and he even beat me up some more. I mean,
oh, really?
Yeah, that was a charitable donation by the time I was done with it.
Don't worry, I've been there, bro.
It was the opportunity that I thought it was going to be. It was toward the tail, or maybe just after that project, there was another Starbucks that popped up in town, and I reached out to that developer and was able to say, hey, we built the one at May and Memorial. Here were our contacts at Starbucks. You can reach out to them, maybe for a referral. Again, we'd love to just give you a bid. That is the beauty of the commercial bid, work is you're not trying to sell anything more than a free bid.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone's going to let you in that door, and we understand that. But, for most guys, it's like, well, what's there to lose? And so, definitely at that stage, we were definitely leveraging the fact that we could be a little bit cheaper. We were lean. Team was starting to grow at that point. We might have had 4 or 5 people. And so we got that second Starbucks. And then Dutch Brothers was coming to town. And Dutch Brothers had built a few already, but we finally kind of weaseled our way in to get an opportunity with Dutch Brothers. And this is a funny story, at least, as I look back. So again, you got to understand the dynamics of how some of these QSRs get built, whether it's a developer-led project or if it's a corporate-led project. But a lot of what you see getting built out there in the market, there's a third-party developer kind of in the shadows. They're the ones funding it, and then they're going to lease that to the corporate tenant for 20 years.
Just to clarify, like they're buying the land, they already have kind of their suite of tenants that would satisfy the space, and then they're negotiating the deal pre-construction.
Absolutely, yeah. So industry calls them built to suit. So you'll have these built-to-suit developers, and yes, they'll acquire a piece of land or get it under contract, and they'll pitch it to Starbucks. And Starbucks go, yeah, no, I really like that piece of land. If you'll build us this, we will rent it or lease it for 20 years and this dollar amount. And so, they work all the numbers, ultimately get a contractor to build it, and then so in those situations, our contract is with a third-party developer. However, you typically have to be on an approved list with the corporate side because they're wanting to control the end result or the product that they're going to receive. So anyways, a developer brought us to the table with Dutch Brothers, and Dutch Brothers said, no, we're not working with another contractor. You need to use one of our approved guys. We're tired of getting burned by these contractors who can't perform, and they're delaying our openings and things like that. Well, again, another situation where I knew we were cheap because the developer put his foot down and said, no, I'm using these guys, and you're going to deal with it. So another project that became a charitable donation, but it got us in the Dutch Brothers. What's funny about that story is 18 months later, 2 years later, this has only been a few months ago, I met the director of construction from Dutch Brothers, and he remembers that conversation that we weren't a part of it. We were just notified of it. Well, as it was told to me is, oh yeah, I didn't want you guys to build that Dutch Brothers at all. I knew you couldn't perform at that number. I knew you were going to delay us, and I knew I wasn't ever going to use you again. Wow. And this was after we had just finished up our 10th Dutch Brothers.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome.
It was a fun conversation to get to have because he remembered it the way I did. Sometimes you hear stories and they're not the way you heard them. But yeah, he was like, no, we didn't want you. So anyways, so we have definitely fallen into that QSR lane. And even within that world, everyone's going to know your Taco Bells and your KFCs and your McDonald's. We are somehow finding a niche even just below those with these, it's the new age thing, 1,000 square foot, drive-through only, you name it, right? And that may be the way of the world going forward, is that no one's going to spend extra money so you can go sit down and eat your $6 hamburger. It's just going to be drive-through. So, that's primarily what we've been building for, the Starbucks. They obviously have their larger footprints that do have a cafe and dining, but they have their quick serve, what they call DTO, drive-through only. They got their DTO locations. Dutch Brothers is that way. Salad & Go is another concept that's here in town. Swig. We actually just heard of McDonald's is coming out with a new concept called Cosmics.
You make it sound like you don't have a strategy in the midst of everything, but you're still coming after projects that you haven't had before. So Starbucks was a new thing, went after it. And then you continue to add big names. So you take these charitable losses, if you will. How do you weather the storm? Like, because there are plenty of contractors out there that are like, yeah, and that's the one that sunk me. Yeah. And so what was that for you guys in terms of kind of balancing that out and making sure that, all right, we still need to stay afloat, but even if we do create a charitable loss here, we may create a bigger opportunity in the future.
Yeah. I mean, you take the Dutch Brothers, for instance, we lost on one and we've won on 13 of them now. I mean, you'll take that to the bank any day. That being said, I mean, it is a little bit of an aim small, miss small mentality. And so I think this is where, I may have not thought through the whole strategy clearly. Maybe the strategy picked me and I recognize that is, a successful strategy or successful opportunity. But is this, Will mentioned when he asked the question, you guys are kind of staying under this $2 million total price tag. Well, I mean, you think about what all that means when you think about a project as a whole. Like, I mean, no individual sub is probably going to be able to sink you if they totally walk on the job, right? Like your biggest contract on that's going to be a couple $100,000. Now, if we had to take a $200,000 hit because of a non-performing sub 2 years ago, yeah, that might have sunk the ship. Today, we can weather that storm. If it was a $10 million project, that individual scope would be $1 million. Could we weather $1 million hit today? Probably not. So I think there's something to be said for allowing your project size to stay small as you're diversifying that risk across, at any given time, we've got 12 to 15 projects going on.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, so don't get me wrong, that has its own headaches, but those single points of failure become smaller and you can weather them. And so we have the opportunity to go into something lean, zero profit,
By the way, I got to give some credit where credit's due here, Dylan, because you and I know a lot about EOS, traction, things like that. Brett, you may correct me if I'm wrong, but you've always struck me as the very rare individuals that are the visionary integrator combos. And I don't know if you would agree with that. They're kind of like a unicorn out in the space, but you've gone out there, pounded pavement, grown the business from a sales perspective, but you also are really sharp at the numbers and the back end stuff, which a lot of owners are not good at. I guess correct me where I'm wrong, or tell me about that journey and experience of finally getting now out of the design aspect, because I know you did that for a long time.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I think it's part of the natural just evolution with growth is that you get to a point where you can't do everything. I mean, I vividly remember the points in our growth cycle where I looked up and I was like, I'm going to kill myself. Working myself to death.
Right.
So you get to that point where I can't juggle this anymore. And I've been so fortunate to have been surrounded by really bright, smart, motivated people who just were standing there when I needed them. You know what I mean? So it's all of a sudden I'm just looking at maybe at that point we had 12 people in the company. Took 2 of them, was you're project managers now. You bid, you run the project. Well, we've never done that before. It's not that hard. I hadn't done it either when I started. And so, we've grown to the point now. I mean, we've got 45 W-2 employees. So we've definitely grown from a head count exponentially. We're not that same super lean, small company we were 3 years ago. And that's okay. We're still going to leverage what we do well to be successful, but it's definitely put me up into a role that I've never been in. I mean, I think I don't know how many entrepreneurs talk about that. We're typically pretty good doers and we may be decent managers, but are we ready to be leaders? Are we ready to take those visionary and integrator roles? I think naturally I'm more of an integrator. That's the accounting, that's the detail-oriented, executing side of my brain I'm just more comfortable in. I would always argue that I'm not a visionary. I'm the kind of guy who's it'd be a great place to buy some land right there next to Target.
The most predictable area.
Right. I'm not the guy who's going to go buy a piece of land out in Piedmont 10 years ago, knowing that it's going to grow. So I think that probably what I'm doing is I'm drawing a picture of a visionary that is a pie in the sky thinker. And for our business, that's not what we need. I mean, the visionary that our business needs is one that figures out how do we grow incrementally, or how are we 1% better every day. So, we're that math 365% better, at year end. But for the company, I definitely sit in both of those seats. And I don't think that can last forever. And I don't know which one I land in long term. For right now, we've talked about that internally because I've been challenged about that by, guys who work for me. Okay, are you taking on both these roles? Right now, yes. Long term, I don't know. I mean, it feels like it will grow to the point where I can't do both of them successfully. And I think I probably end up in the visionary role, even though that's maybe a little less comfortable. But time will tell.
Well, I'm a big fan of EOS, but I'm glad you brought this up because this challenges the conventional norm of most EOS traction thinking, right? And I know the authors use examples of Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, Wright brothers and Charles Taylor and things like that, the Disney brothers. But the fact is most visionaries at a certain point when there's something that is replicable and scalable are just incredibly disruptive to the business. And sometimes, honestly, in my business, I have served my business better by being the hell out of the way and stop big picture here, big picture there, ADHD here. Let's go conquer that, even though I don't need to do that. And so I think there's a lot of merit to say no, there are certain points where it's good to set in the traditional model of no, we need CO versus CEO rather than painting it with the picture of visionary integrator. So and Dylan, you know this because we work with EOS companies all the time, is like a lot of people get stuck with this visionary integrator thing. So I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I think for a lot of people be like, oh yeah, we don't have to fit that cookie cutter model to scale. I think a lot of people need to put the book down for a second and be like, what does reality say? So thank you for sharing that. Sorry, Dylan, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, you've grown rapidly in the last 3 years, and the formation of a leadership team. A lot of contractors can struggle to let go of the vine. And as their growth accelerates, they move up the organizational chart and they have to give away some of the organizational power, right? Now, they have new managers that are underneath them. They have people that are the checks and balances against them, which I know Will, as like a visionary, it's like, well, I'm the owner, this is my idea. You should just accept my idea. And it's really easy to kind of have that mentality. Like, I've been here from the beginning. Who are you to say something, right? But what has that journey been like for you? Maybe in the course of the last year, 18 months, as that leadership team kind of forms around you, and, you have a team that you rely on, and they also are kind of a checks and balances for you. What's that journey been like for you? And where have you seen maybe some struggle of like letting go of the vine? Like, here's something that was hard to let go as the owner operator.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. When thinking about how has that journey of delegating and handing things off gone, and then ultimately to the point where you surround yourself with a leadership team that can support the business. And I think that's a distinction that I've had to make, and you kind of have to internalize, is, do you want this to be an extension of you? Do you want this just to be the Brett Tatum business that really exists to support my family and my lifestyle? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of businesses out there that are exactly that. Or do you want Tatco Construction to be its own living, breathing entity with or without you? And someone put it in this kind of context for me at one time, where they said, there's a point where a business would immediately cease to exist without its founder, owner, operator, right? So, look, you get hit by a bus, business is done. Okay, then there's a point where you get hit by that bus and the business continues but can't grow. And then there's a point where if you get hit by that bus, the business continues and grows. And that metaphor, analogy, is one that kind of resonated with me. It's like, no, I want this thing to continue and to grow without me. So it can't be about me. And that is hard for a type A controlling person, right? Entrepreneurs get into entrepreneurship not because of money, but because of control. That's where I'm at. Honestly, giving up the construction pieces has been very easy because I'm not a builder. I'm not a builder by nature. I like wearing my loafers. I hate being on construction. And if you want a doghouse built, you don't call me. Like, I'm not the neighbor who comes over and helps you build things. I'm not that good at it. So that side was honestly easy to give up. It's the things that most contractors probably would be delighted to give up, like clearing transactions in their QuickBooks account. We hired a controller 18 months ago. He's fantastic. He's smarter than I am. He sees things before I see them, but I don't know if he could clear those transactions. Maybe I should keep that. And so it's little things, right, that are hard to let go, but you do realize at a point where you gotta say, look, what the company needs from me that it can't get from anyone else is X. There's some companies that may be installing the part, whatever the part is for their business. But for our business, it is the person who is flying at 10,000 feet, thinking about how do we align resources with our growth targets? Are we going to have enough people? Are we going to have enough physical space in our office? Are we going to have the capital, the liquidity, all the pieces that go into achieving a goal, right? And we've got some lofty goals out there. We're thrilled with the revenue we've been able to achieve, but we have 5X plans for the business. So that's going to be other markets. That's going to be, other states, other offices, and other management. I say all that to get to the point where we are now, where we have just established the leadership team. And really wrestled with it for a long time, not because of the capability or the competencies of those working for us, but you do look around and at some point you're like, everyone in this room knows as much as everyone else because we all started together 3 years ago or 2 years ago. People have come on over the years. But the things I value as far as, loyalty, commitment, drive, motivation, I'm taking a lot of those things over experience, so it's like you take the controller who's been with you for 2 years now, officed out of the windowless, rat hole of a warehouse with you, and you say, hey, look, you're going to be the CFO. You're going to lead our corporate finance department, our accounting. Or do you go out and you go hire a CFO who's done this for a large construction company? There's definitely benefits to having that outside hire and bringing him as part of the leadership team. But there's certain things you just can't replace. And maybe I'm putting too much emphasis on those attributes, but I'm taking the guy who I know will be on the ship with me when it's sinking. Because someday we may be in that position. It's great now. Things are good. It doesn't take much to turn things from good to bad or good to struggling. So that's how we built our leadership team. It is largely at this point, there's 4 other guys on it who've been with me the longest. I do think as we continue to grow, there will be a need to bring in some outside expertise, some outside knowledge. But I think one thing I've realized in the last couple of years is you can get that on a consulting basis. There's a lot of people out there who have a lot of experience and knowledge who are willing to share that. Even grabbing coffee and beers with guys who have done it, I learn more from Will hour drinking beer, I think that's a long-winded answer to say our leadership team has formed from the guys who were in the trenches at the start. And I trust them with the business, and day to day, they run it. I can't tell you how exciting it was the first time we found a job, were awarded the job, and started construction project, and I didn't do a thing.
It's exhilarating when that happens. It's like, oh, wow, like this can work without me, right?
Absolutely. And, and I think for some guys that would be like, maybe that's concerning.
Yeah.
For me, that's awesome.
Well, I think you said something, and I've never heard this articulated this way, but I'm going to screw it up and relabel it. If it sounds good, we'll make it a Brett Tatum quote. But the fact is, like, if you got hit by a bus and then like the business grew, right? Ultimately, I think a lot of us as contractors need that jolt to say, hey, by you wanting to stick around and own X project that's going to limit your company, it's selfish. And you articulated this really well that like, hey, if I want Tatco to grow in my absence, I have to do this. So you put the business above your self-interest, right? And I think that's a good, like, call it just paradigm shift that I think contractors need to make that says, hey, by you not delegating this, you're essentially being a selfish person. It's like you're putting a parachute on your business and telling it to run a 40-yard dash. It's just not going to work well. But I was glad to hear you say that, but also the people in the trenches. And, I think a lot of people think, hey, let's go hire expertise and skill and bring it into the business. When in fact, hell, in construction, sometimes the grit and the grind is the expertise. And I agree, there is a point where everybody has to eventually bring on some skill. But you've done a really good job in the short amount of time that you've been doing it, Brett. Dude, I got to tell you, it's awesome. And I think people need to hear that too. Like, no, you can start a business and groom and develop people and get them in that role. But you've done a very good job of leading too, which we talk a lot about with other guests. It's like, hey, what got you here won't get you there. And you've obviously gone through the metamorphosis several times, just in your very old age of, 53 now. But anyway, I'm just glad to hear that there's tons of good nuggets here that I hope people are taking away from this, because we hear this all the time. Delegation, getting out of working in the business rather than on the business, and you're getting the answers right. So now the big question, we always ask all of our guests, like, what is the, and we've already gotten some good ones here. Like, I know, like, I hopefully Brett prepared for this. Like, which he is an accountant. I'm sure he prepared. He's probably got like 17 bullet points that are there written on his hand. Like, I like to say, if you got some screw up that willing to brag about that would help other people, what would you share a story about with that?
So some guys obviously like to have cars or, high end, whatever. You're driving a Ferrari, people know what that is. And that's kind of puff their chest up a little bit. Or if it's, athletic achievements. For me, it's definitely the losses that we've had on projects that I have lived to tell about. And so I won't say the name of the project just for sake of it. It is a restaurant here in town, and I don't want to disparage the business, but yeah, we lost $180,000 on that project.
Ouch.
And so this is one of those things where, like I say, we lie to ourselves when we bid a project or we estimate it. So it's like we had gotten 3 or 4 framing bids, right? And it's 4,000 square foot restaurant, stick built, wood trusses. So it's all wood framed. And, the quotes we'd gotten back for the labor on the framing package were, $80,000, $90,000, $92,000.
Wow.
And you're doing the math and you go, well, I mean, I got 6 guys who work for me and they work at $23 an hour. And so I want this job, right? So like what we've established market is somewhere in the high 80s or low 90s for the framing package. And I write down, $40,000 on that line of the bid.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, 23 an hour, and you're crunching those numbers and you're like, oh, surely they can frame that thing in 4 weeks. It's not that the guys didn't know how. I mean, they were intelligent. It was just, if you don't frame every day, you're slow.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're, you also don't want to mess up. You're even slower, because you don't have that intuition, and that gut feel that kind of keeps things moving. So, we've got our framing crew out there and, and then winter hit and it was, this was bitter cold, so then that slowed down, right? And just bleeding. And the benefit of all that is we had really poor job costing at that point in our company. So we had no idea how bad it was. We were able to lie to ourselves all the way up to the end. Get to the end of that thing, all accounting finally settled out. And it was like, yeah, we lost, just on the framing alone, we lost like $80,000.
Wow.
Then through the rest of the project, managed to accumulate another $100,000. So I don't know if that competes with, some of the worst screw ups you guys have had or heard.
Yeah, but you're laughing about it now. Is it the project? Let's just call it like Acme Restaurant. Is like Acme Restaurant now a metaphor at your office?
Yeah, most people would have learned from that experience, but nah, we had to touch that pot just one more time. Now we're done.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but I tell you what, thank you for sharing that. But also, Brett, let's be clear. You have done just amazing things, and, we're not good at celebrating those things and talking about it, but kudos to you, buddy. You've done a great job. Where's the next level for Tatco? Where's this going?
Yeah, for me personally, I have fun every day. I genuinely love coming to the office, what I get to do every day. I'm saying that's, that I also get to choose what I do every day. So there's freedom in that. I know that's not the case for everyone who's there at the company, but for us, it's continuing to grow what we're doing on the Tatco side. We have, like I said, big goals on revenue that's going to take other markets. I'm excited about, what we can replicate. We've opened up our second office in Orlando. We did that this year. We'll try to spend, I'll say 2 years, letting that market get established before we go start another. Here in about 30 days, I'll probably get anxious. And, but I think the motivation behind that is I love employees. And I'm almost scared to use the term employee because it feels, there's almost like a negative connotation to it. But I love the fact that there's 45 people, 45 families that benefit from what we're doing as a company.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of people say, like running a business would be great if it wasn't for the people. Like I couldn't disagree with that more. Like I would be miserable as a solopreneur. I wouldn't be good at selling Mary Kay anyways, but the mindset of getting to bring on more people and grow headcount and grow our team, like that's what's motivating for me. So if we can continue to grow revenue and be profitable and bring on more people like that, that has become my motivation more than I want the Tatco brand to be on every corner or building every Starbucks in the country. And that has shifted a little bit. And I'll say this is probably motivation from Will or inspiration from Will, but this idea of like the labor shortage and what we're going to have on support that we're going to need out in the field to be successful. I've had the opportunity to invest in, some subcontractors or trades that, do heat and air and flooring and some other stuff like that, where I want to continue to do that too, because I think there's going to be an opportunity for the employer that is willing to kind of challenge conventional workplace environment, workplace attitude for the skilled and unskilled trades. So it's like the reality is that my generation, our generation, and the generations behind it are going to be the ones that are going to have to be the plumbers, the electricians, the heat and air contractors, and no one's signing up for it. So why is that? Well, I mean, yes, there's a lot of bias out in the working world, got to go to college and all these, and that's good. I went to college. If my boys want to go to college, great, we'll support them going to college. But if they come out and they're like, I don't know if I want to go to college, great. You know what? Go sign on as an electrical apprentice. See if you like it. They're going to pay you to see if you like it. That mindset isn't pervasive. That's not normal. It's struggle through college. Doesn't matter if you like it, if you don't like it, just get a degree.
Very needed one.
And so that's I can feel that becoming a passion of mine, where I don't want to give handouts. I'm not looking to, do anything that's not going to lead to, a profitable company, successful investment, any of that. But how can you create these companies where you can attract that next generation, give them legitimate work, great pay, flexible hours may not be the selling point. The reality is you got to work during the middle of the day. You can't work from home and be a plumber. But, plumber isn't just plunging toilets either.
No, I think a lot of people were under that impression.
Yeah. And that would be the first thing I would tell my sons to go do if they don't have a clear motivation in life, is go be a plumber. Well, Dad, why would I want to plunge a toilet?
Job security.
And don't go be the roto-rooter. Learn how to lay new pipe. Do new commercial install. Do residential install.
Oh yeah, that's such an interesting career path, because you're learning pressure testing, how fittings work, and I mean with all the manifold technology now, it's pretty cool stuff. And not just we're talking about plumbing, but everything. But by the way, this is going to force us over the time today. But I think one thing that helps you, Brett, is just authenticity. And before we close out today, I was telling Dillon a funny story. Got a great new building, got all these beautiful pictures on the wall. And you were giving somebody a tour the other day. So you needed a building. You had the need for this building. You had the resources to do it. But rather than going to the bank, you put it out to your employees and said, hey, who wants to be owners? Right? Is that how that went? And then they all invested into this building. So all the employees now are shareholders of this building. So that was pretty cool. Thinking outside the box, but also the gift of just ownership over something was so super cool. But sorry, I wanted to put that snippet in there because I think we forget to think outside the box. But I got to hear this story before we close out today, or I'd rather you tell it in your terms.
Yeah. So we got moved in, and because I was in charge of decorating, all I could think to do was put pictures of projects that we've completed up all over the wall. So we got 30 by 40 canvases made. Walking through, right, and I intentionally didn't do a grand opening. Oh, you're gonna do a grand? No, I don't. I don't know. It just made me stomach turn. but love it when people come by because I can give them a tour, right? And I love that that one-on-one interaction. So, banker that I work with came by, and so we were walking through, and I'm showing him projects. Well, this is the Salad and Go in Del City, and this is the Dutch Brothers. And you look at the Dutch Brothers, and you kind of always get a little confused on which one's where, but it's like, well, that one, you know what? That one's in Bigsby, Oklahoma. I remember that one. So anyways, we get to a Starbucks, and I'm looking at it, and I was like, and this is the Starbucks. We definitely didn't build that Starbucks.
But it looks pretty damn good.
That's the Starbucks on 23rd Street, and we absolutely did not build that one. 23rd Street's an all-brick building, right? So a lot of our Starbucks look similar, but they've always got wood cladding or some semi-fist exterior, and it was just like, yeah, and that's ours.
Some employee, that's where they frequent every morning. They're like, we're just going to get this one made for me.
Well, and like the beauty of it is like, I was the one picking out the pictures.
That's hilarious.
And how that one made it through or was in our Rolodex, I'm certain that I was out there one day taking pictures of it oh, that's how that detail looks.
That's all right. After the show today, we'll run down to like a Staples or Office Depot. We'll get proudly built by Tatco Construction. We'll go to that exact Starbucks, and we'll rivet that thing to the side of that ephes. We'll be set.
Always said that the secret to our success, people ask, well, what's the secret to your success? I'm like, well, it's mostly half-truths and white lies. So the sure that's not ours is actually very appropriate.
Right, we'll take credit.
Like, people are like, well, what have you built? And it's like, well, you familiar with the Amazon facility there in South Oklahoma City? Yeah.
That's funny. So first off, Brett, thanks for coming today. If somebody wants to just pick your brain, learn more about like your journey, but also has questions in kind of your space, how do they get a hold of you?
I'm on LinkedIn, getting more active on LinkedIn. I really like that form. And so hit me up on LinkedIn. Email is easiest. Probably shouldn't get my cell phone number out over the...
Nah, we won't do that. But anyway, Brett, thanks for coming. You are somebody I admire and respect so much. I appreciate your stories, but your humility and authenticity. Dillon, thanks for coming back. Anyways, so listen, if any of you guys, just to recap, want to get a hold of Brett, we'll put the contact information. Also, we were talking about interviewing today. If you need help with any of those interview guides, we have them. So reach out to us. You can reach us through the show notes or will@unisonworks.com. And otherwise, we will see you next week. Thanks so much.
Welcome to Beers with Contractors. Grab your favorite beer, pull up a seat, and let's have a chat about the nuts and bolts of the construction industry. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Beers with Contractors. We hope you enjoyed our chat as much as we did. Before we say our final goodbyes, a friendly reminder. Beers with Contractors encourages responsible drinking. If you choose to enjoy a beverage during our time together, please do so in moderation and only if you're of legal drinking age in your country or state. Furthermore, the advice and insights shared in this podcast are for informational purposes only. Always consult with professionals and experts in your field, and be sure to follow local laws and regulations regarding licensing and permits. We're here to help, entertain, and inspire, but your safety and compliance are important. So, as you head out into the world of construction and contracting, remember to build responsibly and make decisions that stand the test of time. Thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you on the next episode of Beers with Contractors. Until then, cheers to your success.